All right, so we are starting the fifth lesson today, right? It is about the operating system. And before we move to the operating system, it has some things for us to get familiar with from the previous lessons. So it is about this hardware, firmware, and softwares, right? So when it comes to the hardwares, hardwares are yeah, Rusira, we'll come to that thing, Rusira. I think we are left with a very few number of questions, right? I'll come to that, right? Since we are like starting freshly, let's go with this and go for that, right? Okay, so when it comes to the computer, you can find there are hardwares, softwares, and firmwares. We talk about these things when we are talking when we are discussing the second lesson as well, right? But here they are reminding us the things that we have learned so far, right? So when it comes to the hardware are told like the components which are tangible components in the computer, right? The physical components that you can see on the computer. So as you can see here in your note, I have given you some pictures, this system unit, the fans, the monitor, webcam, routers, right? UPS, keyboards, graphic cards, central processing unit or the processor, mouse and the motherboard, the RAM, hard disks, right? And CD-ROMs, power supplies, and a lot of things are there, right? So those will be category under the hardwares, the physical components that you can see on a computer. And when it comes to the firmwares, now firmwares are a little bit new to you, right? Firmware are the other things which is manufactured or which is fixed by the manufacturer, right? And it is a hardware which contains a small program, right? So earlier, like when we are talking about the hardwares and hardwares normally does not contain any program inside it. Software is a program itself, right? But when it comes to the firmware is a hardware which contains a small software inside it or some instructions inside it, right? Basically, when it comes to the hardwares, it contains the instructions which needs to boot up a computer, right? So what do you mean by this booting up a computer? It is the process which is going through, any particular computer is going through when it is starting for the very first time. Very first time means like when you disconnect it from the power, and if you close it down or if you shut it down, later when you are starting the system, it is called the booting up, right? So when the boot up process is going on, there are certain instructions to be followed, and those instructions are stored inside these firmwares. Now, firmwares are typically come as a ROM, read-only memory, right? The ROM එක කියලා කියනවා, ROM විදිහට තමයි එන්නේ ගොඩක් වෙලාවට, right? So these ROMs can be found on the motherboard, right? So as you can see, the picture that I have showed over here, this is called the BIOS chip. You can see that BIOS. BIOS stands for BIOS, right? Which stands for Basic Input Output System. So it is one of a firmware which gives the instruction for the computer when it is being booted, right? So what you have to remember is firmware is as such, right? It is a hardware which contains small instruction inside it, majorly which is regarding the booting process or the booting instructions of a computer. Later, we are going to talk about how this particular booting process is going to happen, or like what really going on with the booting process, right? So when it comes to the booting process, like in the older computers, right? Not in the modern ones, in the older computers, you will find a screen something like this when your computer is start for the very first time, or like when it is being booted, right? So what are the details or what are the things that you are seeing in this screen? It is given some basic information about the system, right? And some informations are there which we cannot understand. But if you come like to this third paragraph here in this picture, you can see like CPU instructions are there. Intel Mobile Pentium 3 processor, right? So we call it a P3 processor, right? And 639 KB system RAM. It says passed. 254 M extended RAM passed. Likewise, some familiar words are there, like CPU, like RAM, right? Those kind of things, like cache, right? So some familiar things. Now, this booting process is actually looking after the computer components before the operating system is loaded into the memory, right? That means when you are press the start button of your computer or press the power button of your computer, before you see the operating system on the screen, computer itself check some components or check some regular things are placed in a proper manner to work as a system, right? So what are these things that they are checking on, right? As you can see here, it says the scenario. When the user powers up the computer, the CPU, the central processing unit, activates the BIOS, right? As I told you, the basic input-output system. Now, that is the one which is activating for the very first time. So we are referring to that ROM that we were talking about. Hold on, people. There are some people still getting into this session. All right. So it is the ROM that we were talking about, the firmware, which contains the instruction of the booting, right? That means this. So this chip normally is the one which executes or is the one which activate first. So inside this chip, there are several different programs. One program is called POST, Power On Self-Test, right? So that program is taking the help from a particular memory called CMOS, Complementary Metal Oxide Semiconductor, right? So it is called the CMOS memory. So CMOS memory, according to the CMOS memory, POST program will be able to check whether all the major components are placed properly and are functioning properly. හරියට වැඩ කරනවද හරියට ෆික්ස් වෙලා තියෙනවද කියලා හොයලා බලන්න පුළුවන් POST program එකට. Right? Then after, when it comes to a computer, there is a particular program called, there's a particular firmware called bootstrap loader, right? So that is there on the motherboard, right? So this bootstrap loader, the firmware, will help to the computer to find the location where the operating system has been installed, right? Now, you know, all the programs that we are installing into the computer is inside the hard disk in its secondary storage, right? So when it comes to the secondary storages, bootstrap loader helps the computer to find which particular storage device contains the operating system, and that operating system has something called MBR, Master Boot Record, which help to boot up the operating system, or which help to start the workings, or like start the primary things of an operating system, right? So bootstrap loader will help to find that MBR. Now, MBR resides in a particular drive called boot drive, right? This when it comes to this name boot drive, it is nothing again a particular hard disk, right? තවත් එක hard disk එකක් තමයි ඔය boot drive එක කියලා කියන්නේ. දැන් ඔයගේ computer එකේ තියෙන්නේ එක hard disk එකයි නම් ඒ hard disk එක by default boot drive කියලා තමයි ඒගොල්ලෝ consider කරන්නේ, right? So inside this hard disk, it may divide it into several different portions, which we call partitions. Now, if you consider about my computer, here I got two partitions. I have only one hard disk. It is logically being divided into two partitions, right? And my operating system is inside this C partition, or else we call it C drive, right? So that bootstrap loader is helping the computer to find the MBR from this C drive, right? So once the MBR is found, MBR will help the operating system to load onto the memory. Until the bootstrap loader finds the MBR, operating system resides in the storage device or in the hard disk. When the bootstrap loader finds the MBR, then it gets the instructions to tell the operating system to come onto the memory or the random or the random access memory, the main memory, right? And if a computer needs to show something on your screen or needs to operate something on your screen, that particular program must be taken into the random access memory, right? So that means if we cannot take the operating system onto the random access memory, you won't be able to use the operating system. So all the steps happen before are the steps to take this operating system onto the random access memory. So once it is there on the random access memory, then you will be able to see it on your screen. It means the operating system will be visible to you on your screen. Now, if you take the modern computers, you won't be able to see this kind of a screen when your computer is being booted. Power button එක එබුවම ඔයගලන්ට ටක් ගාලා ලස්සන screen එකක් එක්ක operating system එක load වෙනවා පේනවා. Right? But if you consider some older computers in your school, if you got some older computers, just see how those things are working. When you press the start button or the power button of the system unit, it will show some these kind of instructions quickly, and then you will see how okay, the Windows is going to come onto this screen, right? Okay, so Dihan, so you can find the things that we have done so far from the recording, right? So is it clear up to this point, people, how the system is going to be, or how the operating system comes to the screen by loading into the random access memory? Okay. Right. Okay, to understand this much clearer, we are going to see some video how this boot up process is going to happen, right? So you can see and have a clear idea what really happens, right? So in there, they will tell you some technical things as well, so you can go through that as well. Tedara, now when it comes to the CMOS door, now BIOS is the one which has the instruction of basic input-output things. That means like the keyboard, mouse, monitors, and all these things, right? CMOS is the one which we can involve to change some of the details of the BIOS, some of the details, right? අපිට පුළුවන් machine එකේ CMOS setup එකට ගිහිල්ලා නැත්නම් BIOS setup එකට ගිහිල්ලා we can do some changes. Like we can change the system time, we can change the system date, right? We can change the boot sequence. Boot sequence means when the computer is booting up, there are several instructions to the computer in which drive that the computer going to find the MBR. දැන් අපි කතා කරපු එකේ අපි කිව්වේ MBR resides at the boot drive. Normally it is in the hard disk. But we can change the boot sequence, right, to find a particular MBR inside the pen drive. අපිට computer එකක් boot කරන්න පුළුවන් using several different devices, right? Not only from the internal hard disk, you can use an external hard disk and fix into the computer and say, okay, when you are booting up, first look into the external hard disk. It has MBR, so take it and load it, right? Or else you can say, there is a pen drive fixed into my computer. So that pen drive contains the MBR. So look into that and load the operating system. Likewise, so CMOS are there to save those kind of things, right? I'll show you some pictures of the BIOS setup and how to do the changes using the CMOS as well, right? So Dihan, this is the fifth lesson, Huda, right? We start the fifth lesson, right? And I'm referring to the note that I have asked you to collect, right? So you can refer the note from the screen for the moment, right? All right, let's see what's going on when the booting up process or the booting process happens in the operating system. Let me share the screen with sound. And yeah. Yes, let's quickly.
It's important to understand the boot process because it provides several key pieces of forensic information and allows you, as a forensic examiner.
Now it's better you hear this thoroughly, right? There are some technical terms as well, and it will show you what happens when the power is given, right? So let's see.
To control the boot process, to use forensic booting tools. Let's take a look at what happens when you boot a computer. When you turn on your computer, the power supply sends power to the motherboard, which in turn activates the boot process. The Power on Self-Test post instructions are stored in a ROM, a read-only memory chip, as part of the BIOS, or the Basic Input-Output System. The post runs through a series of tests to make sure everything is working. Most post sequences will have a combination of audible and visual messages to let you know what is and isn't working. These are the beeps that you generally hear when your computer is booting up. The post checks your video card. At that point, you will see information from the post on the screen. The post then checks to make sure it can find a CPU and that it's communicating. Then it tests your RAM. This is a very basic check of whether it can communicate with your RAM. Now it checks for keyboard and mouse. Depending upon the type of keyboard you have, you might see the keyboard's lights flash. At this point, you would normally see an indication on the screen of how you can enter the BIOS setup program on your computer. Each BIOS software vendor will have a different keystroke, but it is often either F2, F10, or the delete key. This vendor's key is F2, and we will enter BIOS setup. This is where important forensic information is stored, including date and time information and the booting order. Your computer can be set to boot from your hard drive first, or from your CD, or a USB drive, or even from the network. If you want to boot the computer with a forensic boot CD or forensic USB device, you may need to change the boot order. Lights on each drive will flash as the post checks them for booting instructions. Most computers are set up to check the optical drive first. This makes it easier to install new operating systems. Then they check the very first hard drive, drive 0. Post is looking for the master boot record. The master boot record is always at cylinder 0, head 0, and sector 1. It points to the boot sector. Finally, post is done, and the operating system takes over. Booting tools. Let's take a look at what happens
Yes, thank you very much, people. Right? Okay. So I will flash back some things to you. Right? So in this video, they were talking about how the power up process is going on. So this power supply is given the current from the cable, right? So once this power supply is taken the power into it, it will like divide or like distribute the power to all the components here in this computer, right? So all the cards and all these circuits are getting power. Once the motherboard is having its power, the first program which is going to execute is the BIOS program, right? Inside the program which is inside the BIOS, right? So then it checks the memory, the video card, the input output devices, as well as the temperature inside the computer, right? Those kind of things, right? So when it is checking its graphic card, you will see the things on the screen. That particular instructions are given to you on the screen when they checks the graphic card, right? So finally, they check for the input output devices, which are the keyboard and the mouse primarily, right? Then what they are going to do is they are going to find the MBR for the operating system to get load onto this, right? So you can enter to the BIOS by pressing the F2 key or like the F10 or the delete key. Meanwhile, the booting process is going on, right? When it comes to the modern computers, entering the BIOS setup is a little bit different, right? They use some advanced method to go to the BIOS, right? But in earlier computers, it is very easy for you to access just by pressing the F2 or the F10 or the delete key, right? Let me show you a BIOS screen over here. Right, so this is kind of a BIOS setup, right? So as you can see, it has a main, advanced, PCI, PNP, boot, security, all those things. Right now here, this lists down what are the devices that is being connected to this computer, right? So all the configurations can be done by here. Right, so let me see the boot sequence over here. Yeah, now this screen, we call it the main screen, right? These are some extra knowledge for you, right? It has this system date and system time. Like I said, we can change these things, right? So this can only be operated using the keyboard. No mouse involvement are there, but in today's computers, in modern computers, you can search for those things. Like you can interact with those things with the mouse as well. And yeah, this is the boot sequence I was talking about, right? So look at this. Here it says, what is the sequence of the boot, right? CD-ROM drives, removable network drives, and boot network boot from Intel. So there is a particular order inside this, right? Method booting sequence. Let me see when it is going to give me the booting sequence. Yeah. Here they were talking about the boot order. So like they are asking to check the CD-ROM first, then removable device, then hard drives, then the network boot device. So if we want, we can change the order. So according to this order, first is check the CD-ROM. If you take hard drive on, you can select it and take it upwards using the arrow keys over here. All right, so they have given the instruction, so you can change it from the keyboard. So if you change the boot order, it will change the way that they search for the MBR. Right, this is what we call the CMOS settings. Again, CMOS wala change karna kiyala api change karanne meka. Right, even though this is called the BIOS setup, this actually records inside the CMOS. Right, okay. Yeah, that's it. I'll come to that point, Putha. Right. Okay, so that is how the computer is being booted up, right? So then we are going to talk about the categorization of the softwares, right? So earlier we talked about the hardware and how the boot up process is happening. Now we are going to talk about the softwares. Now, when it comes to the softwares, there are two major types of softwares, which is called the system software, and the other one is called the application software. Those are the two major types. Right. So when it comes to the system software, it is talking about three subcategories inside it. Right. One is an operating system, which is the lesson that we are going to talk about. The other one is the utility software. And the last one is going to be the language translators. So operating system, I'm not going to talk about it here much further, because it is the one that we are using, or that we are going to talk in the entire lesson, right? So you know, excuse me, you know what is an operating system. You have experienced an operating system, even though you don't know what exactly it is, right? So Windows, Apple, Mac OS, Ubuntu, Linux, Unix, all these kind of things are named as the operating system, right? And the other two categories, the utility software, is something which helping the operating system as well as to the user to manage their work, to analyze their work in a smooth manner, right? So in simple words, the utility software will help the operating system and the user to carry out their work in a smooth manner, right? But remember, we are not using the utility softwares to our day-to-day workings. Right? So our day-to-day things, like the user requirements majorly, is taken care of the application softwares, right? Which we can categorize as MS Word, PowerPoint, games, and all these things category under the, or like list under the application software, right? But utility software is just helping to do things smoothly, like an antivirus software. So antivirus software, we are not using the antivirus software to our day-to-day things. Like in case if we want to scan a particular USB stick or something, we may use that. But other than that, we are not really bothered about the antivirus software. But we have installed it, right? So if you take my computer over here, I have this antivirus software called Windows Defender, right? So Windows Defender will look after my computer and it will protect me protect my computer from these threats and all these things which is given by the malware, right? But I'm not I'm not executing this Windows security program specifically by after logging into the system. When I'm logging into the system, the Windows security is already been activated, right? So then after, it will do its work, right? It will look after any threats have been trying to come into the system. If it comes to the system, it will alert the user. So I can work against that, right? But I'm not using the antivirus software to make a document or to do some entertainment or to do anything, right? It is not like that, right? Later, you will find different kinds of utility softwares. We are going to talk about those things. Yeah, that's it. Some of them are startup programs, right? But not all of them, Pudha. right? Because there are some application programs also which we are fixed as a startup softwares, right? Also startup programs. But when you take antivirus software, yes, it's been set up as a startup program. So, but it is a utility. But you can, I can set this Zoom meeting, so like the Zoom software as a startup program. So it is not going to be a utility software. It is an application program, right? Or the application software, right? So it's depending on the way that it's going to help to the user and to the operating system, right? So here I have listed some of the utility softwares here in pictures. Later we are going to talk about these things in detail, some of those, right? And the other category or the other part under the system software is called the language translators. Now, why these language translators are there in the system or in the computer, right? So you can understand it by this particular picture, right? Now in grade 11, as the first lesson, we are going to learn about the programming, right? So when we are learning about the programming, we get to know a programming language called Pascal, right? Which will help us to create a particular programs with a familiar language to the human, like English, right? Now, here I have given you a small Pascal code over here. You can see some well-known English words are being used in it, right? Like begin, end, write, even though you don't know what about write, ln, but you know about what is write, right? And I have used some hello friends kind of a phrase inside single quotes, right? So it is something familiar for us, something we can understand. It's mostly in English, right? But this particular program or this particular code, which is written by us, which we call a high-level language or high-level language used program, can only be understood by us, not by the machine. Now, why there are programming languages? It is because programmers are humans. So humans should be able to tell their requirement to the computer in a language that the human can understand, right? But the machine can only understand these ones and zeros, right? When we were talking about this computer evolution, in the very first era, we talk about that they use something called punch cards to feed the programs into the computer. So punch cards were illustrating ones and zeros straight away, right? Now, if you think about this binary code that I am showing here, punch card is something exactly similar like this. For zeros, there will be holes. For ones, there will be no holes, right? So just assume a particular card without the ones. So it's kind of a punch card, right? But later, with the evolution of the computer, with the evolution of programming languages, the requirement of the humans are being complexed. So according to that, the programming languages are being built. So those programming languages are made out of human language or like the human related language, which can be understood very easily. So human programmers are given the ability to program complex programs using those high-level languages. Now, the problem is that code, the code that you can see over here, cannot be understood by the machine. As I told you, machine can understand only ones and zeros. So there should be a one, there should be a thing, there should be a software which can convert this particular code into ones and zeros. And that particular software which do the translation is called the language translators. The purpose of those is to turn or to convert or to translate a particular code written using high-level languages into the machine language. In simple terms, turning a program, turning a source code into ones and zeros. So that is the purpose of the language translators. That is why language translators are here. So basically, in a computer system, we find two types of translators, which we call compiler and interpreter. In grade 11, we are going to talk about what are the differences of this compiler and interpreter and how they are going to translate these high-level languages into the ones and zeros, which we named as low-level languages as well, right? So anyhow, here you have to understand, what you have to understand is the purpose, the role of a language translator, right? So it's simply translate the high-level language or a code which is written in the high-level language into a machine language. Okay, people, is that clear up to this point? Right, great. Okay, so moving forward, here we are introduced with the application software. Now, it's not actually an introduction because we know already what is an application software. So we are just given a reminder. So the application software are the softwares which helps to the user to perform his day-to-day tasks. And again, without the operating system, we won't be able to install these application softwares onto it, right? So if you want to use if you want to use any kind of application software, we need an operating system to hold those things or to install those things, right? So that brings us, or that shows us the importance of this operating system regarding these particular components. Now, it's very important for you to understand this particular diagram. Now, you can see this operating system at the middle of the diagram in blue color, and all other components are connected with the operating system directly. Can you see that? The application software is connected with the operating system. Like I said, without an operating system, we won't be able to install the application softwares. In simple terms, if we don't have Windows, we can't use Word, right? You can't install Word without the Windows. Windows must be installed into your computer first, then only you will be able to install the Word, Excel, PowerPoint, the games, the movies, and all these things, all your loved things on the operating system or onto your computer, right? So application software, for application software, it is a must to have an operating system. And again, when it comes to the users, we deal with the application softwares. So for the moment, I'm dealing with the application software called Adobe Reader, right? Which shows my note to you people. As well as I'm using an application software called Zoom to bring this particular lesson to you over the internet, right? And again, if I need to explain or if I need to create some folders, I need to use the operating system. Operating system is the one who given me the ability to create folders. Operating system is the one who has given me a desktop. Without this desktop, I won't be able to have these icons and all these things. And operating system is the one who has given me this taskbar, right? So, like we see it on the picture, human users are involving with the application software as well as the operating system, right? And there is a hidden part as well. Look at the other system softwares. Now, other system softwares is again a software. So, other system softwares will not be able to install into your computer without the operating system. Like we can't install the antivirus software without Windows, right? And the beauty of this is operating system helps us to deal with the hardwares, right? Operating system is the one who identifies the hardwares connected to your operator, connected to the computer system. It recognizes the hard disk, it recognizes the keyboard, it recognizes the mouse, the monitor, the speakers, a printer, a scanner, any particular component which is connected with the computer is understood, is identified by the operating system. So without the operating system, you won't be able to take a printout if you are connected with the printer. Right now, if I need to take a printout from using my particular computer, I'm going to go and press this print button. So it will give me this print window. So I will do the settings and hit on this print button, right? Once I hit on this print button, this particular data, this particular detail will be taken to the printer in my house at somewhere else, right? So through the cable, in my case, it is a wireless printer that I'm having. So the wireless signal should be sent to the printer. Okay, you got something to print. And that is done by the operating system. If the operating system is not here inside my computer, I won't be able to do any printing. One reason is I won't be able to have this application software on my computer. And the other reason is my computer will not be able to recognize the hardware, which is called the printer. Right? So remember, that is why we are telling operating system is the most important software in your computer, right? So with that, all other components are being connected to each other, right? Okay, so then we are going to talk about the different kinds of operating systems, right? So when it comes to these different kinds of operating systems, we are given many different kinds actually, right? Like the Windows. We are going to talk about the Mac OS, which is the Macintosh, given by the Apple Corporation, and some other as well. Here, the first operating system here that they are talking about is the Windows, which is given by the Microsoft Corporation, right? So this is one of the famous operating system that is in the world. So like when it comes to the computers, it is the Windows and the Macintosh are the popular ones. And there are like Linux and all these things, which are free and open source, are not being used that much or like it is being used like Microsoft and the Apple, right? So this Microsoft Corporation has introduced the Windows from the Windows 1.0, starting from Windows 1.0 version. And today we are using the version called Windows 11, right? So we are going to see a small video regarding how these things are being evolved, right, over the time period, right? So it is how the Windows are going to be, and not only for the computers, even though it is being introduced only for the computer back in 1985, right? But with the time, now the Windows operating system is available for mobile devices, right? For the servers, for these smartphones and tablets and all these things, as well as they are like building up a cloud-based operating system for the use of the users, right? And the one which is competing with the Windows in the world is the Apple Mac operating system, or the Macintosh operating system, right? So the Macintosh operating system, the specialty of this is, if you want to experience Mac OS or the Macintosh operating system, you have to buy an Apple product. That means an Apple computer, right? Like, unlike the Windows, you are not given the chance to visit to the market and purchase the iOS and install into any particular device you want. Windows operating system can be installed in many different devices. If we have the installation CD, uh, you can install it in a laptop, in a desktop, or any kind of a device which is supporting to Windows. But Macintosh is not like that. If they are building up the device and they install the Mac OS into it, then they sell the device. So if you want to experience the Mac OS, you have to purchase the device, right? And both these operating systems, both Windows and the Macintosh, are licensed operating systems, right? That means we have to pay to experience these operating systems in huge, right? Like when it comes to the Apple or the Macintosh operating systems, it is considered as the most expensive operating system in the world, right? And Microsoft comes behind it, right? And there are some operating systems which are free to use, right? So like Ubuntu, right? Ubuntu operating system is based on the Linux operating system, which is a free and open source operating system, which was found like, some decades before, right? The specialty of this is it is free and open source. Free and open source means it is free to use and it is free to change, right? If you have the knowledge of modifying an operating system, you can modify this Linux operating system as you want, then you can have your own operating system in your computer, right? There are several organizations which are doing this all over the world. Even in Sri Lanka, there are people, right? So they made their own operating systems based on the Linux operating system, right? And it is a very good service that they are providing to the world, because there are lots of there's a very big population who do not have the ability of purchasing a licensed version of an operating system like Windows and the uh, Macintosh. Even if you like look into your friends and all these things, even you look into yourself, maybe you are not, or maybe your parents may not be capable of spending 20 to 30,000 of rupees to purchase the uh, operating system, right? So for those kind of people, Ubuntu or the Linux based operating system is a very good alternative, right? I'm not going to say that it will be a very smooth run as the Windows and the Macintosh, but that story, that saying is now starting to get expire, right? Because nowadays these Linux operating systems and the Windows and Macintosh are competing neck to neck, shoulder to shoulder, right? So they are there are some changes which has done from the Macintosh and Windows to match the facilities of the Linux operating systems, right? So one of the reason that this Windows and Macintosh are available in their operating system for some people to use it as a free version, it is because of the effect of these Ubuntu operating systems, right? Earlier, everything was for a price in operating systems in Windows and the Macintosh. But nowadays, they are providing some features freely for the users because of this free and open source people, right? They are doing a very respective or like very important job to the world by providing this operating system free to the people who do not have the capability of purchasing a licensed one, right? Yes, Methula. It is Kali Linux. It is very famous to do the hacking kind of jobs, and as well as it is very powerful comparing to the Macintosh and Windows. powerfulness is greater, but appearance wise, user friendly wise, still the Mac OS and the Windows are leading the game, right? And you know about the Android. Android is the change which made like within a very few amount of years. It was just it was found at 2008. It's not very far from today, like what, 12 years back, right? If you think about the other operating systems, they were made in 1980s, how many, 30 to 40 years back, right? But because of the Android, the mobiles were came from like down to the sky with a very huge facilities, right? Like earlier, if we think about a mobile, it is just an analog phone, have some small games and have some small applications based on some companies. Nokia was the biggest one among them. They had that run, but with the Android, Nokia company was flat into the earth, and the Android giant just come on every particular company. Now, like almost all the mobile producing companies, other than the Apple Corporation, are using this powerful operating system called Android. And again, it is an open source software. That is the beauty of it, right? That is why you could found a mobile phone to a very cheaper price, right? That is the reason iPhone is being expensive as like comparing to the Android phone, right? Because iOS is not a free thing. So when they are selling the mobile phone, they have to sell it. They have to put a price to the operating system as well as to the hardware of the phone. But when you are selling an Android phone, operating system is free. So they price that thing only for the hardwares. So that is why comparatively the Android phones are cheaper. Cheaper does not mean it is low in quality, right? Like if you compare the high-end phones which is found in Android versions and the iOS, they have their game upon the line together, like shoulder to shoulder, right? So then when it comes to the Hantana Linux, as I told you, this is one of the operating systems which is built by the Peradeniya University students, right? Now they have formed a particular organization, as I know, which is an operating system made by the Sri Lankans, right? Even if you got the got your Mahindodaya laboratories at your school, they have an operating system which is called Isuru Linux, which is made by the Education Ministry of Sri Lanka, right? So, like I said, these things are helping the world to change as they want, right? Okay, so let's see how this Windows and Mac OS as well as Android, and I have a short video regarding the Ubuntu operating systems, one of the versions, how these things are working now, right? Okay, so first let's get to see about the Windows, right? How the Windows was working. Yeah, so this is about the Windows.
Back with a new evolution clip. Before you start, make sure you subscribe for more interesting videos. Enjoy watching. The first version of Windows was launched in 1985 as an extension of the MS-DOS operating system. Through it, the user could browse a virtual desktop, opening.
Yeah, now this was given as an alternative for MS-DOS operating, MS-DOS, that means Microsoft Disk Operating System. It was the earlier one, which was not given with these kind of colors and the graphics, all these things. So this is supposed to be, or this is considered as the very first Windows operating system, right? So Windows 1.0 introduced in 1985.
multiple windows and displaying the contents of folders with a single click. Also, Windows 1.0 came with Windows Paint, Windows Write, Calendar, Clock, Notepad, File Manager, a terminal application, and last but not least, with a game called Reversi. The second version of Windows was launched in 1987, being more popular than the first version due to Microsoft Word and Excel applications. At the same time, this version of Windows included new features such as overlapping windows, resizable windows, keyboard shortcuts, and support for VGA graphics. Windows 3.0 is considered the beginning of the world's popularity as a desktop operating system. It appeared in 1990 with DOS multitasking programs and the first appearance of the solitaire game. 2 years later, in 1992, version 3.1 was released with important new features such as the ability to scroll icons, support for TrueType fonts, and support for OLE compound file. At the same time, it was the first version of Windows distributed via CD-ROM. Windows NT 3.1 is a server and business desktop operating system launched in 1993. It was a 32-bit operating system and allowed several new functions, for example, User Manager, NTFS file system, network administration tools, and performance monitor. The second version of the Windows NT operating system is Windows NT 3.5, released in 1994. The main purpose during the development of this version was the speed of the operating system, which is why it was named Daytona after Daytona International Speedway. Windows NT 3.5 features performance improvements that require less memory, and new features in this release include the introduction of file names up to 255 characters long, object linking and embedding, and support for input-output completion ports. In 1995, the third version of Windows NT was released, namely Windows NT 3.51. This version had two major improvements. It was Microsoft's first operating system developed on the PowerPC architecture and provides client-server support for interoperating with Windows 95. Windows 95 was launched in 1995, as its name suggests, representing the most iconic version of Windows. It was the first version of 32-bit Windows, included the Start menu, the taskbar, and the plug-and-play function. Also, another important thing included in Windows 95 was the introduction of the
Now, this Windows 95 is considered as the familiar interface of our operating systems, Windows operating systems, right? And they were introducing this Start menu and the Internet Explorer, the browser, from this version, right? So this is like මේක හරියට අපි පාවිච්චි කරන Windows වල පළවෙනි එකනා වගේ, right? 1.0 වුණාට මේගොල්ලන්ගේ පළවෙනි එකනා අපිට හුරු පුරුදු Windows වල පළවෙනිය තමයි Windows 95.
Internet Explorer browser. It was the first version of 32-bit Windows, included the Start menu, the taskbar, and the plug-and-play function. Windows NT 4.0 was released in 1996 and was Microsoft's first business-oriented operating system. It is a 32-bit operating system with a graphical interface similar to that of Windows 95. In 1998, Microsoft released Windows 98. This release came with Outlook Express, Microsoft Chat, Web Publishing Wizard, new hardware drivers, improved USB support and accessibility, and the FAT32 file system that supports disk partitions larger than 2 gigabytes. Windows 2000 came with a number of new features such as an improved device manager, Windows Media Player, and a revised DirectX. It also had a multilingual user interface, with users being able to choose their display language. Also in 2000, Windows ME Millennium Edition was released, later nicknamed the Mistake Edition, because users reported a multitude of problems with its installation and operation. Restoration that could remove and restore certain updates following a faulty installation of a program. In 2001, Microsoft released Windows XP in two versions, Home and Professional. This version was a real success because it was really designed for the consumer, especially in terms of design. It had strong colors, the Start button was green, and the themes could be customized. Among the important functions it was equipped with were CD burning software, desktop search, remote desktop, and improved security.
Now, Windows XP is considered as the most stable operating system so far, right? They have ended up their services like very recently. Until now, they were like giving the updates and keeping the services for the Windows XP. When it comes to the organizations, they are love to use this operating system in their organization, because it is a very an operating system which wants a very low level of performance of a computer, right? So with very minimum level of performance, this will be able to install to a computer, and it is very easy for them to use, right? Has no lot of stuck in part and all these things in here, right? And it works very smoothly, right? Like it is not fancy as we use Windows 10 and Windows 11, but it's very good for an organization, right? Because they only expects the working or like the task that is in their company needs to be done efficiently. So for that, XP is the best thing, right, so far.
Security. Windows Vista was released in 2007 and came with several useful features such as Windows Defender, DirectX 10, speech recognition, and Windows DVD Maker. However, Vista was not a successful version of Windows because it offered low performance, high resource consumption, and user account control dialog boxes became annoying for users. To fix the mistakes made with Windows Vista, Microsoft released Windows 7 in 2009, which proved to be much more efficient than the previous version. This version had a much faster overall performance, could recognize handwriting, the user could preview minimized application windows. Windows 7 also came with Internet Explorer 9 and Windows Media Player 12. Windows 8 was released in 2012, and in terms of appearance, it was totally different from previous versions. This version offered the user the opportunity to connect with a Microsoft account, had support for USB 3.0, Xbox Live integration, and had a lock screen similar to a smartphone.
And if you could recognize, here in Windows 8, they don't have a start button. Can you see that, people? They don't have a start button, right? So this was a huge problem for the users. Later with the Windows 8.1, the major reason to have the Windows 8.1 is to introduce a start button to the Windows 8. Right, you will see the start button on next frame.
Xbox Live integration, and had a lock screen similar to a smartphone. A year later, version 8.1 was released as a free upgrade to troubleshoot Windows 8. So, in the new version, there was again a start button on the taskbar, improved performance, and better SkyDrive integration. In 2015, Microsoft launched Windows 10 with the following important features: Cortana, a personal digital assistant, Microsoft Edge web browser, which replaced Internet Explorer, the ability to switch between tablet and desktop mode, and many other enhancements and shortcuts that give users a much more complex and at the same time simple experience. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.
So that is the evolution of the Windows, right? So it doesn't hold the Windows 11, right, which is the recent version. And yeah, this is the way the Mac OS, the Macintosh, has been developed. Just see how it is. Yeah, this is the version that they introduced Siri for like the voice assistant service, right? So from here onwards, they had that facility, right? So Microsoft has introduced the Cortana like way after this thing. Yeah, this is the latest. All right, so that is regarding the Mac OS, right? And yeah, I think I had something regarding the Android. Yeah, let me refer my link list. Yeah, this is regarding the Android evolution.
The first version of Android was available on the HTC Dream smartphone in 2008. The operating system included Google Maps, YouTube, an HTML browser, Gmail, instant messaging, text messaging, MMS, and more. Something that was an innovation at the time was the Google Play Store, then called the Google Market, and an app store that Google claimed had dozens of unique first-of-a-kind Android applications. Just 4 months after the launch of the first version of Android, the launch of Android 1.1 took place. What brought this version new was that users could save attachments and messages. Details and reviews were available for businesses on Google Maps, and longer in-call screen timeout by default when using the speakerphone, plus the ability to show and hide the dial pad. The next major update for Android was version 1.5 in 2009, which was the first version to use Google's dessert-themed naming scheme and the first Samsung Galaxy phone to have the new Android 1.5 Cupcake. Cupcake had new features and enhancements which we find in current versions, such as the ability to upload videos to YouTube, automatic screen rotation, third-party keyboard support, support for widgets, copy and paste features on the web browser, and the ability to check phone usage history. Also in 2009, Google released Android 1.6 Donut, and the new features included support for CDMA-based networks, and a very important thing in this version was that it supports different screen sizes, meaning phone manufacturers could create devices with different screen sizes. Also, Android 1.6 Donut included the quick search box, the quick switching function between the cameras, the power controlling widget to manage Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and GPS. 1 year after the launch of the first version of Android, the second version appeared, Android Eclair. This was the first version with text-to-speech support, included support for multiple accounts, live wallpapers, Google Maps navigation, and a lock screen that allowed drag-and-drop unlocking. Eclair's 2.1 update brought bug fixes and minor changes to the API. Android 2.2 Froyo was launched in 2010, and the phones that came with this version had several new features, such as mobile Wi-Fi hotspots, push notifications via Android Cloud to device messaging, and the ability to lock the phone with a PIN. Android 2.3 Gingerbread was launched in 2010, and the first phone with this version was the Nexus S, co-developed by Google and Samsung. The new version of Android had an updated UI design, had support for extra-large sizes and resolutions, support for NFC function, improved keyboard, support for multi-touch, and support for the front camera. In 2011, Android Honeycomb was released to be installed only on tablets and phones with larger screens and had functions that could not be managed on phones with smaller screens. The most important function brought by this version is to eliminate the need for the physical button, because virtual buttons have been introduced for the start, back, and menu buttons. The next version of Android Ice Cream Sandwich, was released in 2011 and combines many of the features of the Honeycomb version. This version introduced support for unlocking the phone with the help of the camera, the possibility to monitor the use of mobile data and Wi-Fi, sliding gestures to reject notifications or tabs of a browser. In 2012, Google released Android 4.1 Jelly Bean, and immediately after that, version 4.2 and 4.3 were released. This version relied heavily on the notification side and the introduction of Google Now, which could be accessed by swiping the screen to access the calendar, emails, or weather. Also, the most significant update was the improvement of UI performance and functionality through Project Butter. The launch of Android 4.4 KitKat took place in 2013 and had many interesting features, such as the blue accents found in Ice Cream Sandwich and Jelly Bean became whiter, and many storage applications displayed lighter color schemes. Also, with the OK Google command, the user could access Google Now at any time and could work on phones with a minimum RAM memory of 512 megabytes. Android Lollipop was launched in 2014 with the Nexus 6, which was the first to feature Google's material design philosophy. VM Dalvik had been replaced with Android Runtime, which means that some of the processing power required for applications was provided before they were opened. Also, the navigation bar has been renewed and the notifications looked better on the lock screen. At the same time, a DOS mode was available that shut down background applications if they were no longer used to save the device's battery. Android Marshmallow was launched in 2015 and brought important changes and features such as a new vertically scrolling app drawer, support for biometric fingerprint unlocking, USB Type-C support, Android Pay, the introduction of the Memory Manager, and the possibility to set the volume for device, media, and alarms separately. Google Nexus 6P and Nexus 5X were the first devices to have Android Marshmallow pre-installed, and studies show that this operating system is found on 32.2% of all Android-based devices. In 2016, Google released Android Nougat and includes improved multitasking features, especially for devices with larger screens. Thus, the split-screen mode was introduced. The fast switching between applications, Google Now was replaced by Google Assistant, and the notification system was also improved. Google Pixel, Pixel XL, and LG V20 were the first phones to come with Android 7.0 Nougat. Android Oreo appeared in 2017 and brought a series of visual changes in the settings menu, together with native support for picture-in-picture mode. There is the possibility to activate, deactivate, or sort the notification channels according to importance. Changes have also been made to the emojis, so the blob style for the emojis has been replaced with emojis that were consistent with other platforms. Android Pie was launched in 2018 and brought many improvements on the visual side. Thus, the traditional navigation buttons have been removed in favor of an elongated button in the center, which is the new Start button. Swiping up this button provided an overview of recently used applications, a search bar, and 5 application suggestions. At the same time, this Android version also brought improvements to the battery life. Shush was introduced, which automatically puts the phone in Do Not Disturb mode when its screen is placed on a flat surface. With Android 10, Google announced a rebranding of the operating system, eliminating the naming scheme used in older versions of Android. Google has also announced a new logo and a new color scheme for Android. Android 10 removed the navigation buttons, now using gestures. Dark mode was available at the system level, and users have more control over permissions for applications. Support for foldable smartphones with flexible displays has also been introduced. Google will launch Android 11 starting September 8, 2020, and will bring changes to the notification system. Specifically, it will be anchored in chat applications to facilitate the conversation with the sender of the message directly from the notification. Google is also introducing chat bubbles, a function similar to Facebook's chat heads. By long pressing the power button, the phone will display a new control center that includes quick access to credit cards, and here you will also find Google Home. In terms of security, Google has created new methods for protecting users' data. For example, the user will be able to provide access to various components of an application only once, and the next time it starts, it will require access again. Tell us in the comments what Android version you.
All right, so that is the history. Even though it is a bit long, it was very interesting to see people. Right, so yeah, so that is how the Android, the Mac, and the Windows were evolved, right? And yeah, I'll show you a very short video regarding the Linux. And it's better we get to know about the Linux in case if we are banned by the Microsoft or the basically from the Microsoft for using pirated copies of the Windows operating system. Ubuntu or the Android, like the Linux, will be a handy option to know, right? So this is one of the versions of Ubuntu, which seems to be the latest one, right? We'll see what are the features in this, right? It's a small video of 4 minutes, right? So after that we can end the session, right? And see how nice it is, right? So that is what we have to see through this.
To Ubuntu 22.04 next April, and that's supported for at least 5 years. The desktop may look familiar, but this release uses GNOME 40 by default, which introduces a horizontal workspace switcher and a revamped app launcher. It took me no time at all to get used to the horizontal workspace switcher, and you can drag and drop windows between desktops directly or by using the tiny thumbnails stripped across the top. New multi-touch gestures are enabled on Wayland for entering the workspace switcher, opening the app launcher, scrolling from side to side, and then exiting. Gestures are all one-to-one, meaning they move as fast or as slow as your fingers do. Ubuntu integrates GNOME 40 overall pretty well, considering that the vanilla version is designed around a dock that sits off the screen and at the bottom of the display. While I think Upstream's intended layout is better balanced overall, Ubuntu Spin is still fully functional, and you can always move the dock to the bottom of the display yourself. Talking of the Ubuntu dock, there are a couple of minor tweaks here. Running apps are now separated from your pinned apps by a divider, and the trash can has moved off the desktop and onto the dock itself. You may have noticed that this version of Ubuntu uses a light theme by default for apps, menus, and dialogues. However, the core GNOME Shell UI is still dark, and if you want a fuller dark experience, you can dive into the Settings app to enable it. Firefox is now included as a Snap app by default on all new installs of Ubuntu 21.10. Now, Snap apps get a bad rep due to their slow startup times from cold, though they do get faster on subsequent launches. Though controversial to some, this change is likely going to go unnoticed by the majority, especially as promised speed boosts and feature fixes roll out in the coming months. The Wi-Fi panel now puts previously...
Okay, so as you can see, like most of the softwares, which is the Firefox, like VLC player, all these things were populated from this particular operating system, and it's a very nice operating system to see. And I also don't have a lot of experience regarding this, and I'm willing to learn that, even though I don't have enough time to do so. Right, so that is how the operating systems are in the world, people. So next week onwards, we are going to talk about this type of operating systems, right? And I hope we will be able to cover up a lot more from the unit by next week, people, right? So please, if you do not collect the tute so far, just go to the Nanapetha and please collect it as soon as possible, right? That is what you have to do for the moment. And I'll meet you on next week to talk about the operating system. And once we are done with this, we can go to the next practical session, which is called for the operating systems, right? So thank you very much, people. I'm going to end the session from this point onwards. So have a nice day and have a nice and a very good night. I'll see you next week for the very same time. Right. Thank you very much, people. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone.